We have already discussed the term accent in a different context. Accent versus dialect. In other words, we have discussed the term accent in connection with the speaking, but today I'm going to discuss accent in connection with writing. At the same time, I want to briefly introduce you to the term tone. You could say somehow they're related, or there might be people that might confuse it too. So I just want to clarify the difference between accent and tone. The word accent has multiple senses. Today we are going to focus on the sense that has to do with writing. But then usually writing represents something in speaking. The line again becomes kind of blurry and confusing. Tone is the distinctive pitch level of a syllable, which is centered around the vowel. I have videos on pitch and frequency. In case you want to learn more about pitch, you can watch those videos. Through a process that is called tonogenesis, certain languages have historically developed into tonal languages or tone languages, as opposed to those that have not, which are called atonal languages. An atonal language is a language that is not based on tones. A tonal language or tone language is a language in which tone has a central role. So depending on your linguistic background, if you come from an atonal language, it might kind of be difficult for you to grasp the concept of tone, or in other words, the key role that tone plays in these languages. Probably the most famous example of a tonal language is the Mandarin Chinese language. If you start learning Mandarin, which I have done multiple times, and actually my fascination began when I learned about tones in Mandarin. I learned that Mandarin has 4 tones, which are depicted as you can see in the picture. Each tone is associated with a number. If you look at the lines above the numbers, which is the way you actually represent the tones, you would see that tone 1 is a flat line, tone 2 is rising, tone 3 is falling, rising, and tone 4 is falling. This is actually an accurate way of describing the tones. You have a falling tone, you have a rising tone, falling, rising. These are the actual words you can use to describe these tones in Mandarin. The typical example that you're given to show the significance of tones in Mandarin, and that is the word ma. The word ma in Mandarin, depending on what tone it is pronounced with, would have a different meaning. In other words, the word ma, which is 1 syllable, could become a totally different lexical item with a different meaning depending on what tone you pronounce the syllable or the vowel with. Again, this might be difficult for you to grasp because if you come from an atonal linguistic background. In this picture, you can see the word ma having different tones on its vowel, and in each case, it has a different meaning. The word ma in Mandarin, when pronounced in a level tone, in a flat tone, means mother. Ma, again, I'm not a Mandarin speaker, and my pronunciation is far from perfect. Ma, written with this accent, which is falling, rising, accent number 3, means horse. If you come from an atonal language background, probably you're familiar with the concept of intonation. For example, in English, I'm fine, just falling intonation. And then if I say I'm fine, that's the question interrogative intonation. I guess you need to apply that at the syllable level, not at the sentence level. Then that would be your best attempt, but obviously you will need a lot of practice. You need to know that a tone language is a language where word meanings or even grammatical categories such as tense depend on pitch level or tone. Tone languages are very common in Southeast Asia and Africa. If you're not already scared enough, you should know that you see that every word is associated with a different tone. These are the tones that are pronounced when you pronounce these words separately in isolation. But when words are put together in an utterance, tones affect each other in the sense that the tone in a syllable might change depending on the tone in the adjacent syllable. This is called tone sandy or tonal sandy. For example, a word with a low tone when combined with a word with a high tone may change its tone from low to high. This is interesting phonologically because I have multiple videos in which I have discussed assimilation, and this is one way in which assimilation could take place, because this is something that you could call tone assimilation, or the technical term is tone sandy, of course. Tones are studied as you couldn't say sub-discipline, but you could do tonology or tonetics. In the same way that we have phones and phonemes, there are tones and tonemes, and you can study them in what is called tonemics. Features of tones such as high or low are considered distinctive features in phonology. If you're a tech person, you would already know tones can be pronounced using electronic devices or even a simple tuning fork. But in a speech though, usually you're dealing with complex tones, which consist of 2 or more tones. This brings us to the discussion of accent. You see in the pictures that I showed you of the tones in Mandarin, in each case you have used an accent mark to write the tone. So if you're confused about the distinction between tone and accent, you now know that you can use accents to write tones, or in other words, accents would be the written representation of tones. In writing or graphology, accent is a mark placed above a letter, showing how the letter is to be pronounced. In this sense, accent is a feature of writing, not speaking. Accents are a type of diacritic. For example, in French, the letter E can be written in 3 different ways: accent grave, accent aigu, accent circonflexe. Although in this sense, accent is a feature of writing, it is used as a means of distinguishing the slight differences in the pronunciation, in this case in French, of E, which have nothing to do with tone. They usually have to do with height or the exact place of the vowel in the mouth. In this case, you see that in French we're using 3 different accent marks. In Pinyin, which is Mandarin written in the Latin alphabet, we use 4 marks. Number 1 is the level tone, or macron. So this is a tone, the macron accent. Rising tone number 2 is acute accent. Falling rising tone is hachek. Again, hachek is different than this circonflexe accent in French. And falling tone is grave accent. Again, you can use these accents to distinguish different lexical items. And that's it. That's the distinction between tone and accent.